thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 51, An Adventure at Salamanca, from Book the Second, The Practice of the Mystic Tie by Albert G. Mackey. Part 51, An Adventure at Salamanca. There is an excellent anecdote related in the United Service Magazine by Captain Barralier of the British Army, whose length will readily be pardoned for the sake of the interesting nature of the narrative. The simple, yet impressive style of the author cannot be improved by the use of any other language than his own. I give the record, therefore, without the slightest alteration or abridgment. I joined the 23rd Portuguese Regiment, says the captain, who, it is needless to say, was a Freemason, under the command of Colonel Stubbs, who also commanded the Portuguese Brigade, composed of the 11th, 23rd, and 7th Caçadores, forming a part of the 4th Division under the command of Lieutenant General Sir Lowie Cole on the 16th July, 1812. They were encamped in front of the Nava del Rey. At night, the army broke up the encampment and moved to the rear. The 4th Division halted the whole of the 17th. The outposts were sharply engaged during the morning. On the 18th, we retired again, and at midnight took up a position, having been closely followed by the enemy, and frequently not a quarter of a mile from us. At 4 in the afternoon, the French moved to the front and attacked us, and being repulsed by the 23rd and 40th Regiments, supported by the 11th and 23rd and 7th Caçadores, were soon driven from the field. Our loss was trifling, but we suffered severely from the heat. We remained in position all that night and joined the main body of our army on the 19th. The whole army was now concentrated. On the 20th at daylight, the greatest silence reigned in the camp, and we had laid by our arms at a quarter distance of companies, everything ready and announcing a general action. But Marmont soon moved to his left with a view of outflanking us. Our army now returned in 3 lines, taking the road to Salamanca, and during the whole day's march, the French cannonaded us. On the 21st, the Portuguese Brigade, under Colonel Stubbs, halted within a quarter of a mile from Salamanca. In the evening, we crossed the river and took up our position in front of Areopolis, and we had a dreadful night of thunder, lightning, and rain. On the 22nd, at dawn, the Light Division commenced skirmishing and continued so for some hours. At 10 o'clock, the 4th Division received orders to move to the front and right, and the Portuguese Brigade was now ordered to lay down at quarter distance of companies. At 12, we were ordered to stand to our arms, and each man was told to place a running ball over his cartridge. The 6 Caçadores were ordered to the front and the 11th and 23rd to support them, which was done in a most gallant style. I now, for the first time, saw the entire regiment fall on their knees, offer up a short prayer, and, with the greatest firmness, continue their advance and completely routing the enemy, who occupied a hill on which they had 15 guns, and which soon became ours. At this moment I received a gunshot wound, which passed through both my thighs and scrotum. I fell to the ground. A sergeant and some men of my company remained by me for a moment, and I handed my sword to the sergeant, requesting him to give it to Colonel Stubbs in order that it might be forwarded to my father. Then I sank back, not giving the least sign of life. I was abandoned and plundered, and the men reported me to Colonel Stubbs as dead. It might have been about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I somewhat recovered my senses and found myself exposed to the fire of the 23rd Welsh Fusiliers and French. I was struck while in that position by a musket ball, which pierced my cap and grazed my forehead. Placing my hand on the part struck, no blood appeared of any consequence. Perceiving a hollow near me, I attempted to remove it, but was unable from loss of blood and the stiffness of my limbs. In this melancholy state, I had to remain for nearly 2 hours, exposed to the fire of both friend and foe. A French cavalry regiment now passed me, and some of the horses actually leaped over me, and I received no injury. Soon after, a French infantry regiment in close column of companies passed. A French soldier placed his bayonet on my breast. I made the distress sign of a mason, and fortunately was instantly saved by a French officer, who pushed the bayonet away. Thus was my life most miraculously preserved. Half an hour later, the French repassed, but in disorder, and I shortly saw the redcoats approaching. I now felt sure of obtaining assistance. The regiment halted close by me, and I called out to the officers that I was an officer of the 71st Highland Light Infantry, and begged to be removed from the field. It was the 23rd Welsh Fusiliers, and several of the officers came up to me. They returned to the regiment, and a few minutes after a field officer and 4 or 5 other field officers stood by me. I told them who I was and entreated to be removed, but I had the mortification of seeing the field officer face about and call out, "Forward!" The officers and men called out shame, but the regiment moved to the front. Thus was I, a captain in the same division as the French Fusiliers, left as a dog to perish for want of aid by a man who could have had no feelings for a fellow creature. This was Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Offley, who, I afterwards heard, very shortly met with his death. My feelings now overcame me, and I know not how long I remained insensible. When I rallied, the action was still ragging, but at some distance. I now observed a straggler passing within a few paces from me, and I beckoned to him, and, on his coming up, asked him to remain by me, but the fellow thought I was a dying man and expected plunder. He cocked his musket and was in the act of dispatching me, notwithstanding that I kept telling him that I was a captain in his brigade. The straggler belonged to the 7th Cazadores. Instant death was before me, but Providence at that moment sent me aid. A British soldier of the 74th Regiment came up and cried out, "Is that you, Mr. Barralier?" My reply was, "Yes, my lad, shoot that villain." He raised his musket, and I was instantly relieved from an assassination. The soldier of the 74th Regiment removed his knapsack and placed it under my head, and covering me with his blanket, gave me water, all the poor fellow had. I begged of him to remain by me. His reply was, "Sir, my regiment is in action and I must try and join." But having assured him that he would not be punished for remaining with me, and that I would take all the responsibility, he did remain. This soldier had left England for Portugal in the same transport as myself, and was servant to Ensign Hamilton of the 74th Regiment. I kept calling for water, and, as there was none at hand, he left me to go and procure some. Night was drawing in fast, and my late deliverer was not making his appearance. The time he had been absent seemed very long, and I began to fear he might have lost his way, when a sergeant of the 60th Regiment came near me, and I beckoned to him. He came up to me, gave me water and some wine, arranged my covering, and did all he could to aid me in my forlorn condition. I entreated him to remain by me, but his reply was, "I would willingly do so, but my regiment is now in action and I must join." All my solicitations were unavailing, and he was about to leave me, when despair caused me to hold out my hand to him. He took it, and at once he seemed electrified. After a few moments he exclaimed, "I will try and save you. I cannot leave you." My heart was now in my mouth. I was for some moments unable to speak. Again the German gave me water and then said, "There is a regiment close at hand, and I will go and acquaint the commanding officer how you are situated." He left me, and my hopes now revived, and very shortly after I heard voices approaching, and a man called out, Who are you? My reply was, 71st. A lie, by God. What is your name? Barralier. What are you doing here? I am in the Portuguese service. You must not remain here, and the officer turned away. Shortly after he returned, accompanied by several officers, and they had me placed in a blanket inside Stopford, and 8 men were ordered to take me to the first place they could obtain medical aid. Ensign Stopford of the 68th Regiment often stopped the men to see if I was still alive, and at one period, he placed his hand on my forehead, as I had not answered to his kind inquiries, and exclaimed, "He is dead." The pressure of his hand aroused me, and I faintly said, "No, sir, I am not dead." The march was continued, and in the dead of night, Ensign Stopford had me laid on blankets in a peasant's hut at about 3 miles from Salamanca. He then left me, after he had procured me medical aid. Thus I was providentially saved and removed from a glory field by that brave, good-hearted soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Johnston, commanding the 68th Light Infantry. I was personally known to him and to all the officers of that corps. Colonel Johnston had ordered the soldier of the 74th to remain by me and said that he would report it to his commanding officer. Next day, Staff Surgeon McGregor of my brigade came to me and was surprised to find me alive, telling me I had been returned dead, but as the dispatches had not yet left headquarters, he would write and have it altered. Until the special care of Dr. McGregor, who had me removed to Salamanca. 3 days after, I ultimately partially recovered and obtained leave of absence from Marshal Beresford to proceed to England. I never again saw my Portuguese regiment. As soon as I was able to stand, I was appointed to the command of the depot at Santander, and left the Portuguese service to rejoin my old regiment, the 71st, in 1814. I owed my escape, in the first instance, to the French officer, who happened to be a Freemason, and then to the fortunate appearance of the soldier of the 74th Regiment, as well as the assistance rendered me by the sergeant of the 60th Regiment, also a Freemason, who was the means of my removal. By the brave old soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Johnston of the 68th, late a general officer, and I believe now no more. When quartered in Quebec with the 68th Regiment and at their table, the circumstance has often been alluded to, and as often I have risen to state that I owe my life to Colonel Johnston. The Dr. McGregor's assiduity and skill I am also much indebted. His professional skill is well known. He is now a half-paid physician and resides in Edinburgh. Major Wilmot and several other officers of the 68th Regiment are still alive, and I know these circumstances, and as a mark of gratitude, I have made this known. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.